Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Case Studies. I'm with who has become one of my dear friends and probably one of my most trusted friends, Lance Bullen. I've said this in like 100 different rooms. I think you're the smartest real estate investor I've ever met in my entire life. And I know so many awesome real estate people. You know, I don't.
You should have said that at the end of this interview.
Well, I think everybody.
Too much pressure now.
No, you're just good. And it's so fun for me, like when I spend time with people that are an expert in their craft and love their craft. Mm-hmm. And I think that's always been like what's been so inspiring for me to spend time with you is you love to work. Like you love it. It's like a game for you.
It's my coping mechanism.
it's just, yeah, you're good at it. And you've been good at it. You've done it for a long time. And, you know, I'm like,
well, that's kind of you to say.
Proud Colmena investor, you know, love everything that you guys do. And our company, you know, tries to partner with you guys whenever you guys let us. And, you know, we really like it. So excited to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. And those are flattering words. Thank you very much.
Hey, so give me the rundown. Where did it all begin? Like, you know, and maybe even, you know, your story and your family story kind of tie together.
Yeah.
And so maybe start with like the origins of Colmena, even before you started.
Yeah, even
your
before
origins.
Colmena was Colmena.
Yeah.
So going back in time, you know, my family business, I was maybe a little baby at the time, but my dad was in media. He was in cable TV. He was in radio. He partnered with his father. It was kind of a family business. Decided to buy his father out. And at that time, all the cable companies across the land were kind of like these little mom and pop operators, just like radio stations.
Yeah.
And if you owned the cable, you owned the rights to do the transmission. It was a little monopoly. So TCI, which then became Sonic, which is now kind of what we know as Xfinity and all that, they came through and started buying up all these small operators. So my dad sold out. That kind of gave him his first slug of capital to really go out and do other stuff.
What was that number like? Because
you know, he's never actually told me the number. I want to say it was around 10 million.
Okay.
Something like that.
But it was enough to like,
it was
say,
enough
I'm gonna start investing. This is gonna be we're gonna go grow this thing.
Yeah, for a young guy in Logan who had friends in Logan that were in the real estate business, it was enough to get them going.
Yeah.
So there's a guy by the name of Deloy Hansen. Many people know of Deloy Hansen.
Yep.
John Miller, Bob Saxton, Paul Willey, some of these Logan names that
kind of the godfathers of like Utah real estate a little bit, you know, especially that group has just ran the table. Like they've done so well for so long. Now it's to the point where it's 40 years, 40 years, you know, it's crazy. It's kind of an epic run.
Totally an epic run. So he had enough capital to kind of get Deloy going on a few projects. And so the idea was John Miller was in the beef industry. My dad just sold his company. So there was some seed capital. What was going on in the world at the time was the RTC. Many of us are too young to remember the RTC, but that's the savings and loan crisis.
Yep. So
that's basically a banking crisis that was born from a change in the tax code.
Yep.
You could write off, you know, a whole entire apartment project in 7 years in depreciation. And so the depreciation schedules were so fast that people were doing real estate just to write off taxes, not because they made money. And so you had all these doctors and lawyers and real estate investors that were owning these apartments for no other reason than the tax advantage.
Yeah.
But in 1986, they just swapped it and said, no, we're going back to, you know, a long-term, it's 27 and a half year for apartments and 30 some odd years for commercial.
Yeah.
And so basically that took all the air out of that, you know, depreciation game really fast.
And they just got crushed.
And so they, at that time, instead of having quantitative easing or, you know, bailing out banks that were too big to fail, they created the Resolution Trust Corporation, which was basically, we're going to go buy bad loans and we're going to take bad loans take them over, and that's how we're going to save the economy. Well, as soon as the government started buying bad loans, that marked to market all the other loans across the country, because the RTC was transacting at many cents below the dollar of what was even debt. And so it kind of instantly popped the balloon on valuations. And it was a great time. You'll always make more money, though, in most industries, but definitely in real estate. If you have capital, you'll always make more money in a downturn than when things are doing awesome. It's just the way real estate tends to work. So because they had no legacy problems, they had no other real estate at that time, it was like, okay, let's go invest. And I remember him, telling me their logic, and it was just super simple. It was like, well, we can buy this apartment project for 50 cents on the debt dollar. If we lease it up to X percent, which was like 40% leased, we'll be able to pay our debt. The rest is just upside. Should we do this deal or not?
So we had this deal that got presented to us the other day. It's a office building in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Office isn't an attractive space right now.
Office is,
The original equity holder loses it to the bank.
Mm-hmm.
The bank is selling the note at 50 cents on the dollar.
Very similar.
So all of a sudden we're like, this thing is an unlevered 16 cap.
Yeah.
And we're looking at this going, I've never seen this before. But like what you're describing is like that programmatically. Like there was just a lot of that.
They were not even cap rate minded people. These were guys that were just simple, like, should we do this? Can we convince people to live in this apartment? Long story short, they amassed a big portfolio over the years of a lot of multifamily property all throughout the Western United States.
Yep.
That's called Wasatch Premier Properties.
Yep.
My family was in that business. They're one of the largest stakeholders, along with Deloy and John Miller and some others. And I kind of came up not really working in the real estate industry. But when I switched over to real estate, I did not want to work the mothership. I didn't want to work for
business. Yeah.
Yeah. I just felt there's just something about it. And I still have that like chip on my shoulder, like born on third base type feeling where I didn't want.
You want to go like.
I wanted to kind of go do my own thing. So I got a job with Woodbury, which, is obviously they're a very esteemed real estate company, been around for more than 100 years. Worked on real estate with them for about 5 years.
And what did you do when you were at Woodbury?
I was just a development coordinator.
Because anybody who like knows Woodbury knows that they're just like so good. Yeah. I mean, that like as far as like the blocking and tackling and the fundamentals of real estate.
Oh yeah.
Almost nobody does it better. They're just like, they just do the job really well. So I can't imagine like a better place to go like get some reps.
It was great. I learned valuable lessons. One of the lessons I learned is there's a saying, you make more money the day you buy than the day you sell. Buying right is more important than almost anything else in returns. Their whole goal was to hold everything long-term, think long-term, go into stuff long-term. Real estate is not a business that is a short-term flip mentality.
So if you're breaking down like Woodbury's principles, like what would you say? Like these are the 5 principles that they operate off. You kind of.
So it's slow, controlled growth. Own everything as if you're never going to sell it. Live off of your cash flow. And reinvest everything back into real estate again and again and again and again.
And that's just
and grow a big portfolio. They liken themselves to a tree that grows slowly. And I heard the analogy from Danny Woodbury, who is a really, really sharp guy who's in the 4th generation, I believe. And he was saying, there's trees that grow so fast, they collapse under their own growth.
Yeah.
And there's trees that grow so slowly that they're strong and they'll never fall over. And, so they kind of have that mentality of being like an old growth tree. Well, and they're 100 years old.
But anybody who knows family businesses, they're just so tough. You know
tough.
What I mean? I've got so many friends that kind of have first and second and third generation businesses, and like they just come with like their own bag of tricks, that they're hard to navigate, but it feels like for the most part they've done a great job with Gen 2, Gen 3 of
they've got it so that it's no one's sandbox. No one takes the credit, no one takes the blame. They make decisions together.
Yeah.
Still unanimous.
Wow.
They have like in the generation my age, there's like 40 people, which would be
so hard.
It'd be hard for me. And I was already married and I didn't have the right last name, and they were a great company to work for, but there's definitely a ceiling.
That was never going to be.
It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
So,
but what a gift that like you had 5 years of reps in that environment to start.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Jeff Woodbury was my mentor, taught me a lot. I call him my business dad. He taught me a lot about the real estate world. And everything they do, I mean, when I was with him, it was like, if you can't fit your little business plan on one sheet of paper and have it make sense, it's too complicated.
Wow.
So just keep things simple. Don't overthink stuff. Stay disciplined. It was great experience. And, I wanted to keep in good ties with them, but I also wanted to try other things. So I went away to school, got my MRed at Columbia University.
So tell me about that. How was that? Why Columbia? I mean, you could have gone to a lot of different schools. What was the...
I think I talked to a lot of people that had been to Columbia before. I think the reason is the city is the main asset.
Yeah.
The city of New York is like ground zero for real estate.
I mean, it's that's it. It
is like the real estate developer's dream.
Kind of capital of the world almost. Like there's those hubs around the world. You have the Hong Kong and the, you've got London, you've got Paris, you've got Rome, but then New York is like, it's it. That's Wall Street.
There was a project they were talking about at that time called the Hudson Yards. It's now built. I don't know if anyone's been to the Hudson Yards. It's a brand new neighborhood redevelopment that was built on top of an active rail yard that never shut down. So they built an entire city on a platform above a rail yard that was operating the entire time. So it's just, crazy things that you don't see.
Yeah, you're not going to see that.
You're not going to see that in Utah for a while.
The Midwest, yeah, you're not.
Yeah, and so that was a good experience. I met a lot of people, had a great network. I thought I was going to stay out in New York and just get a big job at a big company.
Yeah,
and that was the plan. And then 2008 kind of hit as we were graduating, and it just felt like the sky was falling and everybody was running for the doors. The epicenter of that particular crash was felt in Wall Street,
kind of more than anywhere else.
Right there, because that's where all the loans that were being sold off. That's where it was happening. So that crisis, which was a crisis of selling tranches of RMBS or CMBS loans, that's where it happened. That's where it went upside down. So. Made my way back to Utah, and
UNM had how many kids at this point?
My first son, and she was pregnant with my second.
Yeah.
And the idea was, okay, there's a distressed world coming. Let's create a real estate fund to go out and take advantage of distressed assets.
Yep.
That was the plan. So I remember talking to Jeff Woodbury about that, and it took some convincing. And at the same time, I also wanted to create our own family active real estate company, which is called Colmena.
Yep.
Colmena means beehive in Spanish. And we started Colmena around that same time. So that's when Colmena got initially founded. It was founded with my father, another partner named Brian Shelley, who's been around working for my family for 25 years.
Yeah.
And my another brother came later after he graduated after work experience too. So anyway, the whole concept of the fund idea, it took a while to get Woodbury to warm up to it.
Yeah.
They had not done funds. They had not done everything was deal by deal, one-off opportunities. and the fund carried interest model was somewhat foreign to them.
Yeah.
It was new.
Yeah.
And, we went out. It was great. We raised money. A lot of it was levered off of our, combined track records.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of had like an all-star group that was going into that.
It was good. I mean, for sure, everyone added to the pot. I mean, we all had a success in real estate,
especially optically.
For sure.
I think, you look back at that and those are just such independent families with independent strategies.
Right.
That it's tough to have all that kind of merge under one umbrella.
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. So the fund got launched. We went out and bought about 29 assets, if I remember correctly. A lot of the assets, some of them were distressed, some of them were just new deals. And I kind of oversaw probably 8 or 9, maybe 10 projects through the Clementa office. And we had like an investment committee and a very formal fund structure and a deployment window and all these things, which was great learning experience for me because I got exposed to a lot of different asset classes.
Yep.
I got exposed to buying distressed deals, what that looks like, building new projects, what that looks like. And in that era, if you think back to 2009, 10, 11.
It feels like if you deployed capital anywhere.
But yeah, it felt horrible to be an investor in real estate. I remember the pit in your stomach.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the best thing about real estate is, not the best, but one of the things about real estate is when it feels the most uncomfortable to be doing something.
It's probably when you should be doing it.
That's when you should be doing it.
Yeah. It's so counterintuitive.
It's really hard to stay away from the herd when everyone is making money in real estate and everyone has got, a development company. That's probably when you shouldn't be doing it.
It reminds me of kind of that like Warren Buffett, when people are bold, be scared.
Yeah.
And when people are scared,
be
bold. Yeah. You kind of have that wisdom of
it's totally the same.
People who've been through cycles, and I think that's always been something that I've really valued about our partnership because we're about the same age.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been through a cycle or 2 cycles, but we haven't been through all the cycles. Like we didn't live through the savings and loan.
No,
we really didn't live through 9/11. Like we lived through it, but we weren't doing business through that cycle.
Right.
But your family did.
Right.
And your dad, he saw those, those cycles and, with Deloitte and Wasatch, you guys saw those cycles. And so you bring this wisdom to 2023, 2024. That's like, these are going to happen again. There's going to be the next savings and loan. There's going to be the next 9/11. There's going to be the next global financial crisis. There's going to be the next COVID. Like they're coming.
That's true.
It's just how life works,
Yeah. There's macro cycles, but they affect different asset classes in the real estate market differently.
Yeah.
So if you said today, what's the macro trend in the real estate world right now? Well, interest rates are high. That affects everybody. But where is the problem manifesting the steepest?
Yeah.
It's in office.
Yep.
Office is going through a reinvention. And that was because of COVID and working from home. And, everyone knows that today about how that
played out.
The office market was completely different after COVID.
Disrupted. Yeah.
And, before that, when I was working for Woodbury, it was the retail market that was getting disrupted.
On its...
And no one knew. I mean, the mall thing was like, malls were the pinnacle of real estate investment.
If you owned a mall, you kind of had it.
You were there. You made it.
Yep.
But malls still exist. It's really a flight to quality. The best 1 or 2 assets in every market
do well.
Is going to make it and do well. Every other place is not.
Yeah.
And so the big story with retail is online sales has really affected the mall experience.
Yeah.
And I had seen this, I saw that, really stuck to me, kind of watching the power go from landlords to tenants. In the retail industry, tenants had all the power. They could call all the shots. They had heavy negotiating tactics. Who gets to be a co-tenant with them? what their lease terms look like, their go dark provisions. I mean, it just went on. And by the time you were in doing a deal with an anchor, you were losing money. I mean, you were basically paying them to come to your center.
You're tied in a knot.
That's
like
right.
You lose optionality.
It's a hairball.
Yeah.
And so I really, really started to get attracted to industrial. Because
this was early, right?
This was
kind
probably
of before the wave.
Yeah, this was 2010, 2011. And like I said, every macro trend that occurs in real estate, if it's like a tube of toothpaste, if you push down on one side of the tube, it's going to bulge in another.
Yeah.
And so the macro trends that you got to understand are, okay, well, this is occurring. What's going to happen elsewhere? Because we're still a growing nation, especially in the West, which is a beautiful thing to be in a growth market. Because we have a growth market in the West, more real estate is needed every year.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, which is great. There are markets that are shrinking. That's a whole nother story. And so if you look at the cause and effect, if the retail sales are being affected by going online, where does that manifest in the built environment? And that's in industrial.
Yep.
And I started reading about it, getting interested into it. And there's 3 times the industrial space than brick and mortar space to perform the same online sale, which baffled me. I always thought, man, it must be so much more efficient.
Yeah. More efficient.
More efficient, not less efficient.
Equal. Yeah.
That's right. And so the numbers are staggering. I think 13 to 15% of all the nation's sales are online. People think it could get as high as 50%. People, 25%.
Europe's higher, right?
Europe's higher.
Yeah.
Europe's higher than we are. And so the bet to me did not seem, the macro bet did not seem like on the thesis side, it seemed like, okay, are people going to continue to buy online more and more? And, this was before COVID, obviously, and this was before the supply chain got disrupted. But every Cyber Monday or whatever they call it, Cyber Tuesday, was always bigger than the year before.
100%.
Exponentially bigger.
Yep.
And I just started looking at my family buying stuff online.
Yeah.
So the macro bet was, okay, I want to start investing in industrial. And if you're going to be in the real estate game, there's always a macro trend that people try to kind of summarize the real estate market into a macro trend for the entire country.
Yeah.
And then there's it's always a good that's consumed locally. So you have to understand the micro trend.
Yeah.
So someone might say, well, macro, this is what's going on. But really, it's a good that's consumed locally. So what's going on here?
Yep.
Where you are, where we are, what's happening?
Yeah.
So for example, a trend of the office world, not a lot of people going to the office world, created mobility and flexibility with a lot of the workforce.
Yeah.
So the mobility created a lot of people moving out of the big cities, away from San Francisco, away from, where they had their big jobs, and went to their big office buildings, and finding and discovering places like Salt Lake City, like Denver, like Montana. I mean, it's just crazy the amount of people that were like,
which affects the residential.
Right.
Yeah.
So that affects the residential world. And then also, if you're going to work from home and, you've got a young family and your kids are running around and you're trying to get on calls, you need a place to work, right? You need a place to be private. You need an office. So the designs of apartments, the designs of housing started to change.
For sure.
People had different needs.
Yeah.
And so that's a trend that is continuing. People want to look professional, even though they're working from home. And so it's that the micro trend, I think, that was happening in our market very much was one about that had to do a lot with people relocating, for the first time in a long time. The last 3 years, we've had more people move to Utah than were born here, which is crazy because we have a lot of kids. And you know, I don't know about you, but like you used to drive on the freeway, and every once in a while you'd see a non-Utah license plate.
It's all over now.
It's like every state in the union.
For sure.
Know, you go to the checkout stand at the grocery store, it's some guys from, you know, who knows where, Louisiana or
I mean,
you know.
Utah, when you take post-COVID, was kind of one of those that it just, you take, because I think something you're not even talking about is politics. You know, like there's certain states that are more business friendly.
For sure.
From a tax standpoint. Like even like during COVID, there was certain states that were like more flexible, others that were more locked down. And I think people just kind of gravitated to more flexibility.
Absolutely.
And so you've got these winners and you've got these losers post-COVID.
Absolutely.
Which kind of goes to what you're saying with the micro trends. You know what I mean? This doesn't have anything with the macro, but it does like highly influence the micro trends.
That's exactly right. And then also when you look at the micro trends with, for example, the COVID industry, when the supply chain, not COVID industry, when the supply chain got disrupted, everybody was like, okay, the supply chain is the longest it's ever been in the history of mankind. So, you know, your pair of tennis shoes that you just bought online, they've traveled the furthest distance they can possibly travel. I mean, they're on the other side of the earth,
the world,
to come to you. And so there's globalization had started to go the other way. It peaked and now it's going the other way.
Yep.
And so there's this idea of bringing critical manufacturing, critical supply, and even just general, jobs in manufacturing more closer to home.
Yeah.
Where you can get stuff in a reasonable time frame, not 60 to 90 days, but actually in 5 to 7 days. And so there's a huge reshoring trend going on, friendly shoring. I think it has a huge impact on Mexico.
Because you're like way bullish on Mexico.
Mexico
like when you think about like who's going to be a big winner from like the geopolitical change in globalization.
For sure.
Mexico being a friendly state next to America, which is the biggest economy in the world, is kind of the obvious winner.
It's a huge winner.
You drive a truck across the border versus take a boat from China.
That's right.
Yeah.
I go to Mexico all the time, and I have video of miles and miles and miles of semis stacked up, waiting to go north into the United States. Mexico has enough labor. They have enough population. They have enough land.
And cheaper labor.
Labor.
Yep.
They've got some, and automation has made the labor cost differential less significant.
Yeah.
It's not as important as the labor cost as it used to be because automation and technology has improved that. So long story short, I really started to believe in the industrial world. I think the industrial world is, it's one of the only asset classes that doesn't directly relate to the number of like an apartment complex. It's the number of people that need to live in that building. An office building, it's the number of people that need to come to that building. Warehouse may not have anything to do with the number of people that need to, it might actually have zero to do with the number of people.
There's no correlation.
There's no correlation.
Yeah.
And so it can have exponential growth that exceeds population growth.
Yeah.
Because of what's going on, whether it's automation.
But it's this type of stuff that I feel like for me personally, I'm not a real estate guy. I'm a investor, but I'm not like a hardcore real estate guy. But I've had friends like yourself and like Brian and Dallas Tanners and these guys that are real estate guys.
Yeah.
And it's been so fun for me to just like be able to have my hand held and kind of go through this because this stuff is common sense to me. Like what you're describing is common sense.
Real estate,
It's like China and America are at odds.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be it's only going to get worse.
Right.
Like from a military standpoint, from an economy standpoint, there's different philosophies.
Right.
And we do most of our like outsourcing to China.
And China has a pretty good chokehold on what we need when we need it.
And it feels like that needs to change. And so you take these, government bills, whether it's the Inflation Reductions Act or the CHIPS Act, and kind of these stimulus that go try to reposition America. And there's, but like, I think the average person's not thinking about that, these macroeconomic trends and political decisions. And you do think about that. You think about that stuff a lot. And when we've gone through the thesis of different deals we've done, you're starting way up here with the macroeconomic and bringing it down to the microeconomic and bringing it down to the asset class within that.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that I'm like, holy crap, like Lance is playing chess when, I'm trying to play checkers on this stuff. And it pumps me up because I can follow it. The cool thing about real estate is you can follow it. You should be able to follow it from A to B to C.
Yeah.
And there should be like a logical path that says,
there's nothing.
This makes sense that this should happen, which would equate to this.
Right. If your business plan in real estate is too hard to understand, it's
a problem.
It's a problem.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Real estate has been notoriously overcomplicated many times, which usually leads to disaster.
Yeah.
You do not need to overcomplicate real estate.
But you guys have been so disciplined on that. You've been so disciplined on value of the purchase.
Mm-hmm.
You're not like an active seller. You're not out flipping in the market, but you are a strategic seller.
Yeah.
And there's cycles where you sell a lot of stuff.
For sure.
I look at kind of this last 2%, 3% interest rate environment. I saw you guys sell more stuff than I've ever seen you sell in all the time that we've been together. And looking back now, it's like completely obvious. You had basically free money and cap rates compressed to like historic lows. And it feels like you guys like timed it perfect.
Well,
a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, never selling anything or selling everything are both extreme views. And I think they're both wrong. You can hold an asset that gets old and long in the tooth and no one wants it and it has to be torn down, and you can get yourself into a pickle because you have an old building that nobody wants anymore. It's
which you have like
obsolete.
Hardcore old school developers that's just their mentality is never sell anything.
That's right.
But then you also have kind of like these young upstarts that it's like, I'm going to just time it perfect. And this is going to happen and this is going to happen and it's going to be this perfect exit cap. And
you cannot time the real estate market.
Yeah, that's
the one thing you have to realize. Whoever said they knew COVID was coming is lying. I've seen more money probably get lost by people who claim to have timed the real estate market. But you just have to think long term. And it's one of the only other assets out there where time heals most mistakes. Not every mistake, but most mistakes. That's the beautiful thing about real estate because we're in a growing market.
Yeah.
Because more people are moving in. If you have a well-conceived project, but you're running into some bumps, usually time will solve that problem.
You just write it out. And you're talking about the factors of inflation, rent growth,
more people coming,
population growth, market cycles, like all of those kind of fixed stuff.
It comes down to staying power.
Yeah.
If you have the ability to wait and be patient, most things in real estate will work out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that complicated. When people come and talk to me about business plans for, tech stuff and, biotech and all these crazy industries that I'm not smart enough to figure out, I almost feel like I'm not smart enough to follow what they're saying. Like I just don't get, it's all based on these projections and all these variables. And I'm not saying they're not smart and they don't know what they're doing. But if you look at the hit rate, they're what?
Very low.
2 out of 10?
Yeah, very low.
Very low. In our industry, if you're not getting on base 9 out of 10 times on the plate
or more. I've done deals with you guys for a long. I've personally never lost money. So it's not that every deal has gone exactly how we thought it would go.
No.
But I've never lost money. I've never had a check that I wrote that went to zero.
Yeah, there's that. Time heals a lot of things. And then capital is the cost of capital and the structure of capital. The biggest investor in your projects will be the banks. I've seen mediocre deals with great capital structures perform very well. I've seen awesome deals with poor capital structures lose money.
It's so profound.
And people focus on what's being built. Is it quality? Is it this? Is it where is it located? The largest contributor to the outcome of real estate will be the debt.
Cap stack.
The cap stack.
Yeah.
It will be how you put together your money.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think a lot of people want to get in the game, and you have to have money to get in the game. But do a deal much smaller than if you have to, so you can have a good capital stack, than a bigger deal
with the wrong capital
capital stack.
Yeah, because it'll eat you alive.
It'll just absolutely eat you. I mean, that's the fundamental. That's where people, they took on a hard money loan. They weren't able to execute on their business plan. The loan came due.
Yeah.
The group wanted to.
We get called, I don't want to say daily, but for sure like weekly and monthly.
Oh, yeah.
Of groups that are in that pickle where they've got a great project, beautiful project.
That's right.
Tons of upside, but they have this hard money, short-term loan, and the project went twice or three times as long.
That's right.
And the note's coming due, and they're like in a bad spot to go get out of this. And you end up selling at a discount. Like in real estate, if you have to sell, it's never a good scenario.
That's
like
correct.
You're never going to capture even a close part of the value if you have to sell.
It's absolutely true. Absolutely true. And the capital in real estate is organized very differently than how an entrepreneurial mind works. What do I mean by that? So for me, if I can buy a big piece of ground that's entitled at a low value, or I can put it under contract and get it entitled at a low value, I will never find an institutional capital partner to come in and buy a big tract of land with me at way below market value. They won't. They just
want
won't.
the shovel ready.
They won't.
Yeah.
But in a year from then, if I go to them and say, hey, I've got a shovel ready project and the land is valued at 5 times what we paid for it, but that's what the value is.
They'll write the check.
They'll write a check.
Because they have kind of the market-based comps.
That's right.
It's more checking boxes, right?
That's right.
It's like I check this box. It's
that's right.
Very little variability. There's a clear path to just like push go.
That's right.
And I think that's kind of been your genius. And a lot of these local developers is kind of saying, we're not the institutional capital, but we know how to get to that point. Because that ultimately, like when you think about your exits,
that's what
over the last decade, most of them are going to institutional capital.
Right. That's right.
But it takes that time to get them to an institutional grade product.
That's right.
That you can sell and
That's
kind of
right.
put a bow on it and make it really easy for somebody to go write a big check.
I mean, it's the whole adage, if you think risk tracks reward in a linear relationship all the time, no matter what, which is not the way I think. Real estate could be a hard asset. I mean, technically it means you should take a lower return in that same scenario. But if the land's already entitled and you can get in at such a value below fair market value because you were able to do that work, in my mind, it's like you just created a bank.
Let's talk about some deal specific, because I think like explaining this principle with physical deals adds color to like what you're talking about. So
we just bought this project in Phoenix. It's right on the border of Gilbert and Mesa. It was the last Morrison Ranch piece of property. It's 300 acres. We put it under contract. It was not entitled, so we put it under contract on unentitled value. And we had a deal in the purchase and sale agreement that said once we get it entitled and it's entitled through the city, then we'll go buy the property.
Yep.
And it's funny. It was a rodeo. Entitlements. It's a, things can go crazy. People can get mad. It's not in my backyard. And there's, a lot of people who will fight things, but if you stick to it and you'll get through it.
Yeah. So
we got entitled, or as we were closer to getting entitled, we noticed offers coming in on the land value for 4 to 5 times more what we had it under contract for. And it's the same dirt. It's in the exact same location. There's no constitutional difference whatsoever in the asset. It's just now that entitlement value causes it to be worth more.
But I think, and obviously we were really excited to be a part of that deal. But I think the magic of that was structuring.
Yeah.
You guys put it under contract with contingencies in the contract.
Right.
That you didn't have to close until you got these entitlements. So you didn't paint yourself into a corner.
That's right.
And you also didn't give up the project when all the value had been, you put it in kind of pre-COVID or right after COVID. And the project was obviously worth more by the time it got closer to close.
That's right.
Yeah. But you'd put the things in place so that you had the time and you also had the protections that you weren't going to lose money on that project. You weren't going to lose your earnest money, and you could go get it to the finish line. And it was a rodeo. It was, way more than I think any of us had bargained for.
Yeah.
But that was also the genius of having great partners, and getting the right partners with the right local expertise, navigating through that storm. And I think now where we sit on that project, you've got this really low land basis. And tie in kind of all the stuff we were talking about with macroeconomic trends, microeconomic trends, and kind of how you think about that project when you're thinking about value creation and optimization.
Yeah. So macro, we've talked about the industrial macro trends that prop up the industrial world. Online sales, reshoring, the chips manufacturing stuff, all of the warehouse artificial intelligence stuff, the automation, those are all trends that favor industrial. So that's what's going on a macro basis. On a micro basis, if you look at East Phoenix, they're running out of land that they will let you build industrial property on. So there's this shrinking amount of land. Just
local kind of municipalities are just saying, we don't want it. We don't want it in our city.
People are sick of being next to an industrial park. And then water. Water's a really big deal.
Yeah, big deal.
Water is a very big deal in the West. And so sites that they're placing moratoria on approvals in certain markets where water is scarce. And so you have a shrinking supply of land. You have an increasing demand for industrial. And then you also, if you look at the Inflation Reductions Act, at how much of the CHIPS Act and CHIPS money was allocated to Phoenix, I think they got $50 billion. They got way more than the average.
They got disproportionate
share of money in order to create chip sustainability for the United States. And that's a critical factor. A very critical factor in this whole, situation we're in with China, because whoever controls chip manufacturing is going to control the economy.
Yeah.
And so East Phoenix is kind of ground zero for that
in the U.S.
That type of work. You've got a very low cost of power. You've got a very robust workforce. You have 1.5 million people that live in that valley.
Really attractive tax.
Good tax situation. Phoenix at large is more than 6 million people. So you're talking about a big, major metropolitan area.
Metro.
And Mesa Gateway Airport is now going, and it's running commercial flights. And the average income in that east side is supportive of the workforce of tomorrow, of the future.
It's higher.
Yep. These are people that are not going to be working in fulfillment and distribution. They're going to be working in these really specific.
And I think you talked about it. You got Arizona State just down the road that has 60,000 students. And, it's a big university that has a ton of skilled labor that's coming out, just down the road.
That's right. So you have to ask yourself, you go sit on that property, and it's surrounded by development on all sides.
Yep.
It's been built on all around it. It's an infill site. And real estate is a question of, will there be value in this site over the long haul?
Yeah.
Will this be utilized for something? In our case, we want to do industrial. We got multifamily approved and quick service retail. So you ask yourself, okay, can you see those uses being active, and can you see those uses working for the next 20, 30 years? And it's not hard to say yes.
Yeah, I think the simple brain, especially when you're describing everything you're describing, and you left off a couple that when we had talked before, these are major like factors as well. Like California is one of the biggest economies in the world.
Yeah.
And it's right next door.
It's right next door, and it's impossible to do business there.
Yeah, with a terrible, like, it's unfriendly to business and really like onerous tax situation right next door.
Right.
So but you kind of have to take it serious because it's such a major economic force. You know what I mean?
The California economy is as big as like France's economy. So it's an insane. You're a milk run from California when you're sitting there. You can go to California and back.
Day trip. Yeah.
Yeah. And so people are saying, okay, this is great. We can do things here and still be close to the population of California and not have all of these onerous issues that it takes entitlement lengths and construction costs and impact fees and environmental studies. And, they're very anti-development now in California, just generally.
Yeah.
And so, to me, the macro to micro like walkthrough on that project made all the sense in the world. Now, does it feel comfortable to buy a lot of land in a market right now where things are kind of a little dicey? You could argue that yes, it does, but we're not dependent on large sums of debt, right? So that if it takes longer, we're still fine. No one can take that project
away
from us.
Cash. You went and kind of just closed it, so you didn't have the debt issue.
We don't have the debt monster chasing us.
It's kind of saying, hey, we'll bring that in when we're ready to go vertical.
That's right,
but not on the land takedown.
That's right. And if on all four sides of this project, things have been built and worked, and what we're talking about is one of the last large open sites that's ready for economic development within the city of Gilbert that they really want to see go successful. They really want to see it become a major workforce location.
Yep.
I just believe in those economic indicators and factors. Everyone tries to say, the last time there was a downturn, Phoenix got blew up because of this, and this. Well, the numbers this time around are completely different. They're not the same.
Yep.
Everyone wants to compare the last downturn this downturn with the last downturn and say it's the same. And they never are the same.
Yeah.
They're never the same. Who would have thought in their wildest dreams that people would be leaving San Francisco and not working in San Francisco, that the Salesforce Tower, one of the tallest towers in the West Coast, is empty.
It's like even 4 or 5 years ago, it's like there's no possible way.
There's no possible way you would have ever said that to yourself.
Yeah.
And so, the desirability of working from home or in a location where people feel like they've got this quality of life that's accessible, like a place, like Utah, like a place like Phoenix. So there's these different attributes now that people are wanting to look, to look for to relocate their family. Their dollar stretches farther. They can afford more.
So summarize everything we just talked about in like 5 simple points of why you bought that property.
I bought that property because there was no way if it got entitled, there was no way that location would not be successful.
Kind of a 2x plus, almost buying it at like 50% of basis
for sure
at that point. So you got this big margin of safety just on the dirt.
Absolutely. When you see the flak, you're over the target. A lot of people were freaking out about that project getting built, which why would I say that's a good thing? Well, people really care about that location. And that means people really want to see that become, something that they can
So you're seeing
appreciate.
like this disruption and the attention as a positive thing. It's like, if I can solve this problem,
it's a positive
this
thing.
is going to be really good for us.
Exactly.
And I think ultimately it was. I remember when we went into that plan originally, it looked way different than when it ended. And, I just finished 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going through this book. I've read it 15 times over the last 20 years. And it was like the first time I read it, I'm taking all these notes, but I'm thinking about this principle, this habit 6 of synergy. And it basically says, when you think win-win, and when you seek first to understand, when you listen before you speak to be understood, the habit 6, you get this synergy. You get this 1 + 1 = 3 or 1 + 1 = 4. And I think about that principle with this project. And you guys thought win-win. You went down, you listened to everybody, took everybody's feedback.
Right.
And that the outcome was a project that was better than the one you put together originally. It was just better.
We were told we would never get multifamily. As a concession, we were given the opportunity for multifamily.
Yeah.
I'm bullish on multifamily in East Phoenix. I think it's great. We're going to build a nice product. And, we're going to stand by our word and do a nice project, and we're going to make it be what we promised it would be to the community, because you want the community to appreciate and to win. People don't want to go to, a bad project. People want to go to places
that they're proud of.
Yeah, they're proud of, that they feel like this is a great place to go eat. I'm going to go check. I'm going to go hang out here. So all of those aspects are there, and we have a great site plan. We have a great architecture regime that we're working on. And, the current environment of the real estate market, we are in a situation where the cost of capital is artificially high on purpose. The government artificially inflated the cost of capital to
try to clamp this thing down,
to slow down the economy. And so it can be reversed, and it will be reversed.
I mean, I think
they will drop the cost of capital again. I was
seeing something the other day that the kind of most recent forecast was kind of projecting 6 rate cuts over the next 12 to 18 months.
Right.
So they kind of feel like they've
nipped the inflation
bug, and
and because our industry is so susceptible to the cost of capital. Banks have a lot of money due. And if the government is going to not drop the cost of capital, or they're not going to help bail out banks that are big, they're going to create a Great Depression again. And so you ask yourself, is the cure worse than the disease? Inflation was the issue. That's the disease they were trying to cure. So if they don't bail out any of these banks, they don't drop interest rates, people can't refinance, there's pandemonium all over the place. And we're in a much different situation where it almost doesn't matter. No deal pencils.
Yeah.
And so if you think about the amount of carnage that would create in America, I think it's not too hard of a stretch to realize that they are going to drop rates as soon as they possibly can. Not fast, not overly aggressive, probably not down to the levels they used to be.
But I think you fast forward 2 or 3 years, and it's going to be a much different rate environment.
1,000%.
I mean?
And that's why right now our strategy is get loaded up with the right types of things in the right locations. Get your entitlement work done, get your plans drawn, get your stuff, be ready.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than being flat-footed when it switches.
Yep.
And there's a pent-up demand because things haven't been built.
Yeah.
You want to be ready to deliver products.
I mean, it's been so fun for me as an investor over the last, and specifically an investor with you over the last 15 years.
It's been great to have
see you guys take advantage of these cycles, to anticipate, trends, big into industrial. We've done so many fun industrial projects that we both got into and also exited.
Right.
Taking advantage of the lowest interest rate environment that any of us living have ever seen. And to be able to harvest some of that work that you put in for the last decade. And, you know, I see kind of where you guys are positioning now, and it's fun. Like I'm a strategist at heart. I love strategy, and I love watching strategy play out. And I admire the way that you guys think about strategy, you know, and so some of these projects are so fun. I want to talk about a couple of the projects. Talk to me about the Point project.
Okay. Yeah. So the Point of the Mountain project is where the old prison used to be in Draper. Coincidentally, we have a lot of property over where the new prison got built, which is the northwest quadrant. The Point of the Mountain area is owned by the state of Utah. They came out with a board and a governance chart and basically said, okay, we're going to go out and we're going to solicit proposals from the development community. And we're going to go far and wide. We're going to look at development proposals based on our framework plan that we've put together. And long story short, I never thought we were the underdogs but we have a great partners that we ended up coming in together with.
It was you, it was
Wadsworth and Lincoln Property.
Yeah, and Lincoln's out of Dallas, right?
They're out of Dallas.
Yep.
Great company, big company, you know, have done work with all the big tech companies, you know, all the Fortune 50 names you can think of, and really have the ability to take what hasn't happened yet in Utah and cause it to occur here in Utah. Yeah. And so...
And was that the pitch?
That was the pitch.
That we're bringing kind of the local expertise, but we're also bringing, you know, a national player that has experience redeveloping projects like this and modernizing them. Like, was that kind of what resonated?
That was the pitch. The pitch is we've got the local team that understands the politics here, understands the lay of the land, understands how have experience in these bigger redevelopment projects where you've got tax increment financing and all these other tools that are public financing vehicles. And then we also have a big company that's executed on millions and millions of feet all over the world.
Yeah.
And I think the combo of the two just resonated really well with the selection committee.
Yeah.
I did not think, I never thought we were going to win that.
And there's
project.
Major players in this thing and competent players, you know, like exceptional operators.
And I think we squeaked by on every stage.
I mean, I wasn't surprised to see you guys, win. And it's specifically just because of all of the stuff that we've been talking about. You're just very thoughtful. And specifically on this project, you were very thoughtful on how you were going to attack this project and like the product that you could go deliver for Utah.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately that's what resonated was the vision of what you saw this Point project meaning to the state of Utah, because I'm trying to think of a more relevant project that's ever happened ever in the state of Utah. And I can't really think of anything it's more focal and could have more impact.
I mean, it could be the most important infill site anywhere. You know, if you think about what it represents.
I mean, when you take Utah and you take I-15 and you take Salt Lake and you take Utah County where all the population is, and this is just that spot right in the middle.
This is right in the middle with transit.
And it's just been dead. It's just been this dead space that it has this opportunity to be so much more.
Utah, we're running out of just greenfield land. You know, Utah's a big state, and you would think, well, there's land everywhere. You can just keep building. The reality is there's not. We have water in only a few areas. We have land area left in only a few counties. And the next 10 years of Utah real estate development are going to be very different than the last 10 years. It's hard. I don't think people realize that, okay, we were sprawling with these neighborhoods, single family homes. That's how we were using most of our land.
Yep.
That was the typology that was being used for most of our land that was left. Well, that takes a lot of land area to do that. And the amount of people that you can actually, satisfy in terms of finding a good place for them to live, it's less. But if you can create the right type of neighborhood that's very urbane, that has a lot of the attributes that some of these really cool places in America have, true sense of place, urbanization and density doesn't have to be a scary thing. It can be a great thing. Your quality of life
but you
can
take
be an amazing
examples
thing.
of these New Yorks and places that like take this highly urbanized area
Right.
and they create these spaces that are inspiring.
For sure.
And even the architecture is inspiring. I mean, anybody who goes there, it's inspiring. It's just beautiful. And it's like the idea of bringing that to that spot that was like this prison.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It completely changes like the landscape of Utah.
It does. And it really is the center of the population of our state. If you were to draw a line and say, where do half the people live north and half the people live south, it would be right around there.
Yep.
And Utah County, we know, is the
population growth is Utah County.
Yeah, it's going to surpass Salt Lake County.
Yeah.
And Salt Lake will always be Salt Lake, but the way Utah County is going to be from an influential perspective, from a leadership perspective, look what it already does.
I mean, it's electric. I mean, I was talking to a friend the other day, and it's like, hey, where would you live? If you could live anywhere, I'd live this place. I'm like, I'd live right where I'm at. I love where I live. Like I'll travel other places, but like I love the energy. I love the entrepreneurial spirit. I love the weather. I love, I've got like my network here and people I care about. And I think about Utah. It's just a rad place to live. And I think, post COVID, the world kind of found out that Utah is a rad place to live,
It's so true. It is so true. And at the end of the day, there's this false premise that developers cause growth. I've seen developers take credit for growth, but in reality, we don't cause growth. Developers react to growth.
Yeah, of course.
The question is are we going to keep growing? And if the answer is yes, we're going to keep growing, then the only thing we have to do is consider how do we react to the growth that's coming. And a lot of people think, well, if we just stop this project, then it won't happen. And so there's this anti, let's stop projects, let's not let them happen. Well, guess what? That same amount of growth that you quote unquote stopped, just moved to another further away community, put more traffic on more streets, created a harder time for commute, created more pollution, worse air quality, and put a bigger burden on a smaller community than should have happened. So it's not like there really isn't a success story of saying we are going to stop people from moving into our community. It makes people feel good to fight.
You're just punting it down the road. And probably a worse outcome. There's places that are better built to handle it. And there's places that aren't.
That's right.
And you're kind of kicking it off to a place that's not as good to handle it.
That's right.
But that's where the politics and the local politics comes in.
That's right.
So let me simplify this, going out to people that are just getting in real estate. If I'm a first-time real estate investor, like what if you were talking to your son, how do you explain real estate in the most simple terms, to make it attractive? If you're selling your son on, hey, you should invest in real estate, how are you spelling it out to him in a way that is compelling, but also just simple?
Well, every year more people come than the year before. And that means there's less land available every year, especially in constrained markets like where we live.
So I think about Sam Zell. Have you ever read his book?
Oh, yeah.
So he talks about these two principles. He says, these are my two principles. Supply and demand and liquidity equals value. And he just operated off of these, And so like what you're describing right there is more people That means there's too much demand and not enough supply.
That's right.
Which equals higher prices. It equals buying lower and it being worth more. And so that's kind of what you're describing is
exactly,
the growth of population.
Yep. So if you can find an asset, it's funny, you go to the avenues in Salt Lake City, those houses are hundreds of years old, but they've been lived in and served the same purpose for hundreds of years
and over
again.
Yeah.
And if you said, okay, I want to see all the money that's been paid in mortgages on that house, and you totaled it all the way up, it would be millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Right? Of mortgage payments.
Of course.
And it's still going to continue forward and serve its purpose. And so real estate is, okay, more people are coming. That means there's more demand. I have to find something that can prove useful for the next 30, 40 years. What is that?
Yeah.
And if you don't think any harder than that, if it's like single family home, if it's apartment, duplex, if it's, a nice little neighborhood commercial corner, you just think about simple things like that, you're always going to be fine.
Yeah.
Where you get into trouble is where you speculate way too much on some crazy idea, some special use. Hey, I'm going to turn this, location into some crazy use no one's ever heard of. It's a big flyer, but we're going to try to make it work. It's not entitled.
Yeah.
Just the principles are the same. And even if you bought a single family home, rented it out with some friends, made no money, but paid your mortgage and just did that for the next
time.
Yeah. For the next 10 years, you'd come out okay.
Yeah.
And that's and all the aspects of real estate you would learn all the aspects of positive leverage, of debt, of what it means to collect rent, what it means to manage a property, keep it, livable, keep it attractive. It's a low barrier. I love it because it equalizes the playing field. It doesn't matter how big of a company you are or how small of a company you are. If you own the site, you own the site.
Yeah.
And so I love the equalization factor of real estate. You can be a relatively small company like myself and be involved in some really cool stuff.
You can be a real player. Yeah.
And you don't have to go build a company with 1,000 people.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Yeah.
I just absolutely love that.
So we could like literally go on this topic all day. And I think like you could go on this topic all day. Like you could just go and go and go.
I'm sure everyone's asleep that's watching this.
But it's actually not the case. Like the whole point of this podcast, the reason I'm so pumped to do it, I wanted to do it for a long time. And I know really awesome people that aren't public figures. Most of them, they're not public figures. They don't have a public presence. They're not like but they have a really great story and they're really smart. And it's trying to like dig in and like go capture that in a way that you can share it with other people, these amazing stories. But part of the theme is not just the profession, but also like the personal.
Mm-hmm.
And so talk to me about your personal philosophy of life outside of work, but like as a dad, as a husband, even just as a man, kind of leaving a legacy. Like how do you think about life from that aspect when it's not, the real estate is something that you do, but that's not who you are?
I think a lot of people, including myself, fall into a trap that is what I do is who I am.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the kid test, my children's test. If I come home and say, hey, I just did this deal today, are they going to love me anymore? Are they going to say, yeah, they'll say, good job, Dad. That's great. But did I make a change in their life? Was I there for them when they needed me? Do we have a better relationship accordingly? Bringing home the bacon when you're young is a huge you feel that very intensely. But as you get older, you have to start weaning back.
It's almost an addiction.
You have to wean back. And for me, work is a coping mechanism. If I'm frustrated or if I'm upset or if if I'm not having a good day, I just go to work.
Yeah. Because you can control it.
Because I can control it.
And you can impact it and you can move it forward. And there's that scorecard that's so actionable and you get these dopamine hits. And
so I'm forcing myself. I'm hiring and delegating. I'm a horrible delegator. Horrible. But for the first time, I'm creating enough of a system around me to where I can spend time completely away from the office, and just sit in silence and make myself be happy. And
is that like impossible for you? Is that like a big change?
It's really hard for me.
Yeah.
And my wife is an amazing person.
And she's ridiculous. Like
done
anybody who spends time with you guys, she's so much more dynamic than you. And I'm not discounting you, but like Emily's just like the life of the party. You know what I mean?
She's great. And she's had to put up with a lot of crazy stuff for me.
Yeah.
I mean, she knows what it's like to be married to, the Lance that always had to go away to work and never be home. And there's not that much time in your life, really. When you think about it, we're not given that much time here on this earth. We just aren't. I mean, when I turned 40, that was kind of a big time in my life. Wow, I'm 40 years old. I'm halfway there. I think you have to get it right. And getting it right means, like, if you've ever been to a funeral of somebody who was had major accomplishments in business, but no personal stories or no personal friends that came and talked about the type of person they were, other than just the accolades that they achieved. It's the most depressing funeral you've ever been to.
It's just a miss.
It's a total miss. And so right now I'm trying to ask myself, and this sounds corny and cliche, but I ask myself, what would be said at my funeral?
I don't think it is. Like
if I died today, what would people say?
But I think that's the thing is, like, I don't think it is corny and cliche. I actually think it's like one of the most relevant things that all of us can do.
Yeah.
Because if you can answer that question, it changes behavior.
Big time.
Like, it changes behavior today.
Yeah.
Like, I think about this morning, I wake up, go meditate and study. But at 7:00, I take my daughter to school.
Yeah.
And I do that because of that question.
Yeah.
Of when I'm at my deathbed, what do I want? And I'm like, I want an intimate one-on-one relationship with my daughter. And she's a teenager. She's going through stuff.
Right.
And we had a 20-minute conversation that didn't start out good, but at the end of it, it was good.
Right.
And we would have missed that. And I would have missed that every day if I don't have that habit. And then I think about getting home and my other kids need to go to school. And usually my wife takes them and I say, hey, I'll take them. And I go have that same conversation with my two young, but all of that is impacted by that first question that you're asking of, like, when I'm on my deathbed, what legacy do I want to leave? And it's like, I want to be a good dad. And like, the money's not going to matter.
Money's not going to
But my kids are going to, like, if they can say my dad loved me, my dad was there for me and he cared about me and he listened to me. I'm like, so I don't think it's cliche. I think it's like pressing. You know what I mean?
It's a trip. People say they work for money. To a certain extent, that is true. I think at some point you have to agree to let go. And the weirdest thing about it is, when I've seen this happen with people who are really, really good at it, of letting go and empowering people, they end up making more money than they ever would have made.
Thrive,
Things thrive beyond imagination because they're not trying to just control every variable. They're empowering and trusting others.
But it's so hard.
When they do that and you see it happen, we all know of that inflection point where you can see that happen with somebody. And I hope someday to get there.
You feel like you're experiencing that right now.
I'm getting
like you're going through that.
That's what I'm doing right now.
I got to let go.
I've got to let go.
I got to trust that next generation to step up.
I've got to let go. I've got a good team. I've got to put faith in my team. I have an unhealthy fear of failure, and all failure is teaching.
Isn't that crazy though? Because I think anybody who would look at you and look at your company that you built from the outside looking in would be like, Lance is fearless. Like those guys just send it. They find big projects. They take the contrarian view. They make bold bets. They've been right a lot. That doesn't signify fear. That signifies a lot of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like human nature is that we're all fearful.
Yeah.
We all deal with the self-doubt and insecurity and all those things. And I think courage is doing it anyway. It's persisting in spite of the fear and moving beyond it and having courage,
Right.
Saying, yeah, I'm feeling this, but I still think it's right. And I'm going to go for it.
I think it's also too surrounding yourself with people there's all sorts of different forms of leadership. I am not the most inspirational leader. Like I know my strengths and weaknesses. If I had to, have 1,000 employees and get them psyched to go do whatever, I would fail miserably. I know where my skill sets are. But when you surround yourself with good, positive people that you can trust, and they are also in it for the same reasons, it's a beautiful thing.
Oh my gosh, I don't know if there's anything more beautiful.
And if you find people that, like I used to think my job as CEO was to make everybody happy. Hey, are you happy in your job today? Is everything good? You happy? And I realized that my job is to not make sure everyone's happy. My job is to make sure that the vision and direction of a company is executed.
Wow.
And if people aren't happy in that environment,
they're not the right people.
It's not my fault.
Yeah, it's not the right people.
It's not my fault.
Yeah.
And we have these golden handcuff policies that you see in business all the time.
Of course.
I hate them.
You want people to be able to
I won't even do them because I say to myself, if you don't want to work here, why would I want you to be forced to stay here? So I want people who are excited about and passionate, that want to be a part of what we're doing. And as soon as they realize it's not for them, and it isn't for everybody, there's just no way you can create something that is the right thing for everybody.
Of course.
Then I want to find them. What is it that floats your boat? Let's go get you there. I'll help you. No hard feelings. Because there's plenty of people that would want to take that seat if you've set up that right.
Yeah.
If
you're building something great.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're building something beautiful. So let's end with this. Talk to me about faith. Talk to me about your faith and how that's influenced your life decisions, and how it still influences your life decisions.
I was born with severe club feet, and I spent the first 8 years of my life getting reconstructive surgeries, wearing braces, doing physical therapy, all manner of bones taken out of my hip to put in my foot to make it work, and so I could walk, and if I had not had those surgeries, I would be a cripple today. And my baby footprints in my baby book look like question marks because my feet were literally pulled to the side. And I look back and I say, if I were born in any other era, I would be probably on the street begging for food somewhere, because I literally wouldn't have anything to offer the world in certain times of our history.
Existence, for sure.
I would probably have a horrible, miserable life, and I would need crutches, or I would need someone to wheel me around in some sort of wagon or something. Yeah. So I look back and the year I was born was the same year that the top surgeon in the world in the field of clubfoot reconstruction was practicing in Primary Children's Medical Center in Utah, that happened to be my doctor. And I still don't know what I'm supposed to do because of that, because of why that got put together for me. I don't know what it is I'm supposed to do because of that, but I'm extremely lucky. Actually, it's not luck. I was given something that I'm supposed to do something.
You feel like it's a stewardship.
And I know I haven't done it to the greatest extent possible. And I have to continue to find out what.
How exciting is that? Like when you look forward, because I see the world out of that same lens. I see the world that like I'm a steward.
Yep.
That my health, that my wealth, that everything that I have is a gift. It's not mine.
Yes.
And that it's that parable of the talents.
Right. That
all of us have been given a different batch of talents. But at some point, I'm going to have to go meet my maker. And I'm going to have to go like present like, hey, you gave me this. And this is what I did with it. You know what I mean? And when I think about like that idea of like being able to go return and say like, look at this, like I kicked butt. I went hard, I went as hard as I could go. And, I tried to do the most with like what you gave me. Like that pumps me up. Like when I think about like a beautiful life being at the, end of it, is to be able to say like, I was a good steward. I tried to take what I was given. And it feels like that's what you're describing, which is, I look at where you're at in life.
Yeah.
And you've got a beautiful family. You got a beautiful marriage. You got a beautiful business. You're healthy. But you got like the best impact in the future, not in the past. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like it's prepping you for this moment.
The years ahead are I know they're going to be better than the years in the past, even though the years in the past from a career perspective have been great.
Yeah.
I'm more excited about what's going to happen.
How fun is that
down the road? And I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But, it won't be, I can't keep this pace and keep doing what I'm doing and stay sane.
I mean, you guys are insane. Like
there's just no way.
You guys like the impact, what you guys have done the last decade. I mean, like I tell you this all the time. I just feel lucky to be a part of it.
I appreciate
I feel lucky to have a ride on the rocket ship. And it's
very kind of you.
It's one of those where it's like, if Brian Shelley sending me an email, I'm responding. Yes, I'm in. How much can I get? Well, brother, it was so fun having you out. It was a privilege, and hopefully, we'll keep jamming on this and kind of do 2.0 and 3.0 and go into some of the deeper delves on different projects. And,
I love it.
But thank you for coming out, and appreciate you, and, love you like a brother.
Thank you so much.
And you're, I feel grateful to have friends in my life like you.
Me too. I feel grateful that you're in my life as well. Not many Caseys out there.
All right, brother.
I appreciate it.